Okay, so number 18 is y is equal to 1 sine of 2/3 x. So as before, the a, which is in front of the trig function, is the amplitude. That's the absolute value of 1, so it's 1. A is a 1, and then now b is what's going to change things. That is in front of the x. So the domain goes left and right in both directions forever. So negative infinity and positive infinity. And your range again will not be affected, so it is 1 to negative 1 because there's no a to change it. And then your period now is going to be affected. So remember, your period is 2 pi over b. So in this case, it's 2 pi over 2/3. And then please don't forget, 2 pi divided by 2/3 is the same as saying 2 pi times 3 over 2. So your period becomes 3 pi. So again, 2 pi over 2/3 becomes 2 pi times 3 over 2. The 2's cancel, so your period is now 3 pi. So now you have all your pieces that you need. So again, we go left to right and vertical. So again, our range is just going to go up and down from 1 to negative 1. And our end piece, our last period, is going to be a 3. So I'm going to make 4 marks again because I need that for the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be a 3 pi. And then I'm going to go negative 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 3 pi. Okay, to fill in your other pieces, pretty much, if you think of it, halfway between 3 and 0 is 1.5. So you can label this either 1.5 pi or 3 pi over 2. And of course, the negative will be the same. And then to fill in the other two, you go up to look at your period and divide it by 4, and then that's what you're adding to each one of these. So my increment becomes a little bit more important here. So my increment is 3 pi, which is the period, over 4. So each of these hash marks is increasing by 3 pi over 4. So that means this is a 3 pi over 4, and that means this is, this one here is 3 pi over 2 plus 3 pi over 4. Let me do that on another piece of paper just to show you how we did it. So okay, so again, the increment or the first point comes from the period broken into 4 different parts because we have 4 different positions. So 3 pi divided by 4, so that's why this first increment is 3 pi over 4. And then actually the 3 pi over 2 comes from doing 3 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4, which is 6 pi over 4. And then I divide both by 2, so that's where this came from. So then on to make your last mark, you're doing 3 pi over 2 again plus the increment. This can't stay, so I have to multiply by a 2 over a 2. So I end up with 6 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4, or 9 pi over 4. So that's what goes in there. So again, the increment is just period divided by 4. So that'll be the first hash mark. Second one is either halfway between 0 and 3 pi, or 3 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4. And then the third hash mark is the second hash mark plus 3 pi over 4. So I can go negative also. So negative 3 pi over 4 into negative 9 pi over 4. Okay, so we know our up and downs are going to be a range of 1 and negative 1, so we know that that's as high as it's going to go, and we know that that's as low as it's going to go. And again, just like before, we know this is our midline, so negative 1 plus 1 divided by, oops, looks like I'm running out of orange. Okay, so now we can fill in our points. Now we know sine starts at 0, 0. And we know that the period has to also end at 0, 0, just based on the sine of x. and we know that there's a point in the middle that is also an x-intercept. So it is a regular sine feature, so we know it goes up first. We know it then has to go down. So here's our hill and then our valley, and then again I take it, same thing, these are x-intercepts. So here and here, but now instead I go down, up, and then there is my number 18. Okay, I'm skipping to 24. I think I'm missing something. All right. Okay, I will come back and, where's my list? Sorry. Okay, we're going to do, sorry, I found it. So we're going to do 22. So our next problem is problem 22, and that says y is equal to cosine of 2x. Okay, so again, we can do the same labeling. So again, there's an a value of 1, so absolute value of 1. So the a, and then the b is a 2. So our domain, again, absolute, or excuse me, negative infinity to positive infinity, and then a range, again, because that is a 1 value from 1 to negative 1. Okay, so if we do our period, now we do, again, 2 pi over b, and the b in this case is a 2, so our period is actually pi. So if we make our picture, we know we're only going to go up and down by 1, and we know we're going to come out to pi. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's going to be pi. 1, 2, 3, 4, negative pi. Okay, we fill in these other 4 spots then. So pretty much we know halfway between 0 and pi is 1/2, or pi over 2. And so this is negative pi over 2. And again, if you look up here, your increments are period divided by 4. So we know this first one is pi over 4 and negative pi over 4. And then again, just like before, this is pi over 4 plus pi over 4 to get pi over 2. So pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. Again, or it's halfway between 0 and pi. And then our last in between is actually pi over 2 again plus the increment. So this has to go get common denominators. So 2 pi over 4 plus pi over 4 means this last one is 3 pi over 4. The other way you can think about it is you're just doing fractions, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1. So now we have our hash marks, and we're going to go and put our upper limit of 1, our lower limit of negative 1, and then again we know that the midline, negative 1 plus 1 divided by 2 is 0, so we know that's our midline. Okay, we know that this is a cosine, so we know cosine has to start up. Alright, we know cosine has to finish up. And we know cosine in the very middle has to go all the way to the bottom, or your lower limit. So here, and then these are going to be your x-intercepts. So there's your pattern, and then again we're going to go the other way. So this again will be an x-intercept, this will be an x-intercept, and again it'll come down, continue down, and then finish up. So there is y is equal to cosine of 2x. Okay, the next one I'm going to do is problem 24, and that is y is equal to 3 sine of 2x. So now, as you can see, we have two changes. We have an a and a b. Okay, so our amplitude again is the absolute value of 3. So our a is a 3 and our b is a 2. Okay, again, we go on forever and ever in both directions. So absolute value, or excuse me, why don't we want to keep calling it absolute value? Negative infinity and positive infinity. Our range, because of the 3, is up and down from negative 3 to 3. And our period is 2 pi over b. So our period is pi. Okay, so again, we're going from 0 to pi and to negative pi, and I can pretty much borrow these from up on top. So pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and then negative to go in the other direction. Okay, so again, we have an upper and a lower limit at 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we know the picture is going to stay between, it's kind of like your frame, it's going to stay between 3 and negative 3. And again, 3 plus negative 3 divided by 2 is your midline. So your midline is at the 0. Okay, so this is a sine. So we know sine has to start at 0. Okay, and we know it has to end at the period, and we know it has to have a middle point also. That's an x-intercept. So again, I can do it the same going the other way, and I know it is a positive 3, so it's going up first, coming around, going down, and we're done. And then we follow the pattern again, down, up, and around. So there is 24. So that is with both changes, both an amplitude change and a period change. Okay, so let's move on to 26. 26 is y is equal to negative 5 cosine of 2x. Okay, number one, the amplitude is a 5 because it's always the absolute value of negative 5. So my a is actually a negative 5 and my b is a 2. Negative to positive infinity. You can't remember, they go on forever. My range is going to be from negative 5 to 5. And then my period is going to be 2 pi over b, and b in this case was a 2. So I'm at a period of pi. So again, okay, I can pretty much mimic from before because I've had a period on these last few. I guess I didn't realize the numbers were all 2's. So we're at pi over 4, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 4, negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, and negative 3 pi over 2. Okay, we have a range of 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5. Okay, so again, our upper and lower limits are going to be at the 5. And our midline again is negative 5 plus 5 divided by 2. So it is at the 0. Okay, so again, it is a cosine, so we know it has to start not at 0, 0, so it starts at the value, the highest value that we have, or the lowest value that we have. And because it's a subtraction, remember it's a minus 5, that means it's a reflection. So again, normal cosine, remember, had your hill up here. So in this case, since it's a reflection, you start at -5. So instead of a hill going through the x-axis, you have the valley. So that's because of the negative in front. It's a reflection of the original. Okay, we know that our x-intercepts are going to be at pi over 4 because I'm coming up, and again at 3 pi over 4. So I know it's going to reach its peak at the pi over 2, come back down, and the lowest will be at pi and -5. So that would be my first picture. Then again, I mimic the x-intercepts. So at the -pi over 4 and the negative, whoops, just realized I made that a 2. Okay, and then at the -3 pi over 4, we know we have our intercepts, and again it's going to come around, go up first, and then come back down. So there's our number 26. Okay, let's see, so next one's going to be 28. Okay, so 28 is y is equal to negative sine of pi times x. So again, this is a reflection. So instead of starting up, it's going to start down. So our amplitude, again, absolute value of -1, so it's a 1. A is a -1, and B is actually pi. It's whatever's in front of the x, so that's my B. Okay, so then my domain, again, negative to positive infinity, and my range, -1 to 1. Okay, period, 2 pi over B. So my period is actually a whole number. Okay, so my period is going out to 2, so halfway is a 1, and so halfway between is a half, and whoops, and 1.5. Goof that one up. 1.5. So because your increment is period over 4, so it's going to move by 1/2. So 1/2, this is 1/2 plus 1/2, this is 1 plus 1/2, this is 1.5 plus 1/2, or 2, and then I go the other direction, and I could call it -3 over 2 also. Either one I would accept. So 1.5 or -3 over 2, and then -2. Okay, my range is only 1 and -1, so it's only going to go as high as 1 and as low as -1, and then I know my midline is just the range -1 plus 1 divided by 2. Eventually we get to a point where the midline is not 0, but right now it is 0. Okay, so if we go to graph this, we now know that sine starts at 0, 0. We know that it ends for the period at 0, and we know the middle will be an x-intercept. Now keep in mind, remember, it's a minus. So instead of normally going up, it's going to go down first and then up. So same thing, it's got to follow the pattern. So it was down, it's got to go, again, whoops, here's my intercepts. So it's got to go up and over, and then back down and over. So there is 28. Okay, problem 30 is y is equal to 3 cosine 2 pi x. So there's a lot going on. You have an A value here. This is your B value. So amplitude is absolute value of 3. So that is a 3. The A value is a 3. And then the B value is actually that whole 2 pi. So remember, again, this is your A. That's your B. Okay, domain, again, negative to positive infinity. And range, we're going up and down by 3. Okay, and then my period is 2 pi over B. So I'm back to a regular number, so my period is actually 1. Oh, and then, okay, this is our increments. up here was the period divided by 4. So now my increment down here is period divided by 4. So that is my increment. So that's what you're adding for each of the sections. Okay, so all right, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, with spacing's getting pretty bad. So we're going out to a 1, to -1, and again, I know halfway between is a half, and my increments are 1/4, so I know that's where it starts. And then again, really halfway between 1 and a half is 3/4. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. Okay, we're going up and down 3. And so we know that those are our limits, so it will not go higher than this, and it will not go lower than that. And again, midline stays as the axis. Okay, so we have, it's a cosine, so we know it starts off of the 0, so it's either up or down. In this case, it's a positive, so it starts at the 3, and we know it's got to end at the 3. Okay, middle point's got to be the lowest point, so these are my intercepts. So there's my valley picture for cosine, and again, I mimic the intercepts over here, and so I know this one's going to come down. I'm going to come all the way down here, go back up to there. So that is cosine. So 3 cosine 2 pi of x. I have one more and then I'm done. Okay, so we have, last one we're going to do is number 32. So y is equal to negative 2/3 sine pi over 4 times x. Okay, so amplitude is the absolute value of the a. So amplitude is 2/3, but the a is negative 2/3, and the b, again, I'm looking here and here. Whatever's in front of the x is the b value. Okay, again, positive, negative to positive infinity, and range is the a value, so negative 2/3 to positive 2/3, and my period 2 pi over b, which is pi over 4. So remember, 2 pi divided by pi over 4 is the same thing as multiplying by 4 over pi. So the pi's cancel, so actually my period is a whole number, or the number 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going out to 8 and negative 8. Okay, halfway in between is a 4, and then if I look at the period, 8 divided by 4 is 2. There's my increments. So I know the first two has to be a 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. Okay, our range was up and down 2/3. So 1, 2, 3. So that's a 1. 1, 2, 3. That's a negative 1. So we know our upper limit is at 2/3. So we know that's going to go through there, and we know our lower limit is at negative 2/3. And again, we know our midline. No, I'm not too symmetrical there. Is at the 0, 0. Okay, again, this is a sine, so we know it starts at 0, 0. We know it has to end at 0, 0, and we know it has to have an intersect at the middle. So this is a negative. So again, remember, normal sine goes up and then down. So in the case of the negative, it's got to go down first and then up. I mean, I'm way out of proportion because actually those should be the same measurements. Okay, then I know again I have an x-intercept at 4 and negative 8. So I know I'm going to be coming up and down. So there's a 2 pi representation of y is equal to negative 2/3 sine of pi over 4.